The Kimber R7 Mako Carbon Compact Tabletop Review and Field Strip. And while there are other videos out there on this already, I bet you I'll show you something the others haven't. Coming up next on GBGuns. Before we get into the gun, a little bit of background. This Carbon Compact is the first gun that Kimber has sent for the channel, so thank you, Kimber. We were approaching 500 pistols reviewed without a Kimber sent from you, aside from this R7 Mako that I purchased a while back because, well, there was something nobody had said about it. This, if you haven't seen the review, is one of my all-time favorites of the micro compact family size, and part of that is the Bubit's improved action. You notice the top of the slide is closed, like the Taurus TS9 and the Bubit's BB6. Wilhelm Bubitz is a firearm engineer designer that has worked with Walther, Glock, Steyr, Caracal, and others, with his technology and designs being incorporated into some of the most popular and famous handguns out there. A few years back, he put out his own gun, the Bubit's BB6. If you're seeing this weird cut here, this is for a hardware-less optics mount system that I thought was pretty brilliant. It was all polymer based, but it locked in on these ledges here. But the thing that I am most grateful for, well, I can't say that, but one of his leading designs that up until recently has been relatively rare to see is having the locking part of the barrel be back here instead of at the leading edge on your typical Browning tilting action design. Now what that does, first off, it does require a closed top slide, as we've seen on these three examples, and you'll see on the Carbon Compact, but it creates much less barrel tilt. As a 4-inch barrel, you see this is tilting much less than normal, so you have less weight shifting in hand, and believe it or not, that changes the way the gun feels while shooting. That mass of the barrel going rearward, down, up, and forward with each shot does impact your perception of recoil and how smooth and stable the gun feels. So by moving to this design with the locking lug being on the back, you'll see more when we field strip Carbon Compact, you've got less tilt. It also allows the barrel to sit a little bit lower. It actually has to sit lower because the feed ramp isn't as long for when it tilts to pick up the next round. So that gives you a slightly lower bore axis. Is bore axis all that people make it out to be? I don't think so, but it doesn't hurt. And it gives you that closed top slide design, which now in the optics age, and mind you, this old BB6 was already ahead of the game with an optics mounting system, you no longer have those gases and casings occasionally being thrown at the glass of your optic. So you end up with a cleaner running optic, longer, with less recoil, less shifting mass in the gun. Now, the BB6 unfortunately was commercially not a success. It's kind of an ugly gun. It's got some awkward things. Cool trigger safety down here that flips up. Or you can just swipe it off and have your finger right there. That was also a Bubitz feature. So this disappeared, as did BB Tech's GmbH out of Österreich, Austria. His son had the Bubitz Bro, which is essentially what the R7 Mako is. Now, it's never been confirmed, but if you look up the Bubitz Bro, you'll see that that and the Kimber R7 Mako are essentially the same gun. Kimber just kind of updated the styling a little bit, and props to Kimber for doing that, because I thought it was a gun that had great potential, and the R7 Mako proved that. Unfortunately, this was the only US market small gun. Taurus has the TS9, but that's not on the US market. This is a kind of mullet gun, so we've got a compact slide full-size grip that was created for a contract down in Brazil. However, the only ones that came to the US were a slight production overflow, and Taurus didn't want to bring it to the States. So we didn't have an option for a compact gun using this action type unless you happen to find a BB Tech's BB6, but these are pretty rare. Only a few of them were made, even fewer were imported to the US. So I am extra excited to have this Kimber on hand. Now let's take a look at that. So inside a rather nice box, and this box is dual printed. We've got visuals up top praising Kimber, and I think a pretty cool thing down below as well. This is a little bit of an extra step. It does add a little bit to the price, and we do see that in the price of these guns. And another bit that explains some of the price on these is this very nice Kimber range bag. We have a zippered pocket up front, we have a mag pouch pocket slash accessory can go in here, and then inside, this is the kind of thing where if you're like me, you end up sticking 3 guns. One back here, one in the middle, and one up front, which is where Kimber has stashed this pistol. In the front pocket we have our additional back straps, which I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe was also one of Bubit's contributions to Walther. The P99 was the first pistol to have interchangeable back straps, but Kimber has included those in the bag. We have a sticker, our lock, and the manual, and of course, as always, we're going to take a look at the manual. Now, as you observant ones might have seen, it says to scan here for instructions and operator manual. This booklet is purely just the safety precautions. It does go through different models. It's kind of all-encompassing. It's the legalese coverage, if you will. The one thing that's in it is the one bit that I did want to look up for you guys, because they always ask, is plus P ammunition okay? According to this manual, plus P ammunition is okay, but it does warn, of course, that physics are physics, and so a steady diet of plus P ammunition will accelerate wear and tear on your firearm. That applies to all guns. That's not just this gun. It's built to plus P standards. Having a scannable manual is a clever thing. It helps cut down on cost. It allows also for updates and changes to be made should the gun evolve or different models come out. It's far easier to just edit that and then have one living document online available. So, clever there. Now with all of that out of the way, we can take a look at the gun. You can see optics ready, which is nice. Man, nice strong sights. Those just grab the eyes right away, and that's one of the things that I liked about the R7 Mako Micro Compact as well. Alright, stay focused. Doing our tabletop review as always, start with the slide lock to the rear and see if we get magazine ejection or release. We get a little bit of hop, so there's a little bit of kick there to help get it out. Metal body mag, you do get 2 with the gun. They are windowed all the way to 15 rounds on both sides of the gun. And no, it is not quite the same as what was in the BB Techs from yesteryear. Those were windowed on the left side, which is my preferred side. That way it's easy to check coming out of the gun. But you notice that the mag catch, though a similar cut, is slightly different on the BB Techs than it is on the Mako. I was just kind of hoping that maybe I could pick up some of these and have more mags for my BB Techs, although I honestly don't shoot it that much because it's more of a historical collection piece. That out of the way, we do have ambidextrous controls. Magazine release is active on both sides, works from both sides. How does our slide catch release work? Very nice, easy. Oftentimes when you've got these ambi slide catch releases, because the actual catching is happening on this side of the gun, you are transferring force, turning this motion into a torsion motion on a bar reaching across to then release the catch on the other side. And sometimes those pieces aren't strong enough, and so you don't get a good transfer, and you end up either having to push really hard or feeling it kind of twist. You feel some squish on there, not the case on the Carbon Compact. So excellent job there, Kimber. Coming up front for slide to frame fit. Well, we've got, our frame is, yes, overhanging. You see that? A little edge there. Our frame is slightly longer than the slide. Find that to be interesting. Almost like a little mini standoff. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but there is definitely an edge there. So that'll be interesting. We have some of the kind of bowl cut to the front end of the slide that makes holstering a little bit easier. Find your way in. These slide serrations are of a classic design and they work. Now this slide arrived very well oiled. I did a quick wipe down just so I could touch it. You can see the barrel still very shiny there from the oiling. So even with some of that on there, I'm able to grab quite easily, even with poor form. Speaking of form, one of the things I find very interesting about this, and a brilliant idea, is this ledge right in here. That is an index point for your trigger finger and a thumb rest ledge for your support hand. That's awesome for helping control recoil and digging in, and I really appreciate that they went inward instead of outward, because when you go outward the gun gets wider and you start to have holster compatibility struggles. On the topic of holsters, you might be wondering, it's a relatively new gun, can we get a holster for it? If you guys saw the article over on my website, yes, you can. This is just about a perfect fit. I would need to do the adjustments as I demonstrated in that video, but very cool that I've already got a holster for it. We've got 3 spots of pick rail underneath, texturing on the front of the trigger guard. This texture that's all over the gun is fairly aggressive, not painfully aggressive, but it definitely holds on. It's the same stuff that we saw on the R7 Micro Compact, and both T and I really liked it. Notice there's also a bit of a toe kick here, so between that texture and that toe kick on the trigger guard, good trigger guard for those that like to have their support hand wrap around the trigger guard. We do have a double undercut on the trigger guard, and it's textured underneath there. That's also going to lend itself well to grabbing onto the gun. And you notice this generous cut. This is quite a deep cut in here, and large enough for my banana hands to fit very comfortably, which will be exciting. T and I got to shoot this briefly at TriggerCon 2024, where Kimber was running the Barnes Tech XP, I forget the exact name of it, but they were running defensive loads through it. And I got to say, hats off to Kimber for having people feel a defensive gun as it would be defensively used, shooting hollow points and defensive loads at a range day. Very cool. The downfall to that, of course, was that everyone else was running super soft range ammo. So, for the day, it made this gun feel like one of the snappier pistols of the day that we shot. That's not fair because it's not the same ammo. When we do our range review and, of course, our What's for Dinner test, we'll have a better feel for it. But just a note, especially for those of you who were at TriggerCon and might have shot this and said, it's kind of snappy, I don't know about all those benefits they talk about. It was also snappier ammo. While we're down here, we'll do our trigger talk. Clear. Safety dingus works and is light. We feel immediate pressure. A lot of guns have kind of a light take up. There is immediate spring pressure as soon as you're on the trigger. And it's kind of a pull through break. But very crisp. That reset. A little on the long side, and brings us just before the break with a little bit of more smash through. Now, some self-proclaimed trigger snobs would call that a bad trigger. I say for a defensive pistol, this is a great trigger, because if you are in panic mode or really wanting a gun, it's not hard. If you're unsure or timing, you're not going to have any startling or anything like that cause you to fire before you intend to. When I think about this, the scenario I always put in my head is there's a bump in the night and for some reason you need to leave your room. Say there's family members or other things. I strongly suggest that if there's a bump in the night, you hunker down, stay in place where you are, you know your terrain, they do not. Call the cops and be prepared to defend yourself. But were you to have to navigate the place in the dark or something like that, and for whatever reason your finger on trigger and then you step on the kid's toy or the cat darts or something like that, that can cause a negligent or accidental discharge and may result in hurting a loved one or lawsuits when you put around through the neighbor's wall. So having a slightly heavier trigger does not deter me. If you guys saw our Glock Multiverse comparison, the gun with the atrociously heavy trigger actually did great in that speed drill. So don't worry about it. Back onto this pistol, I like also that there is not the traction stuff through here, which is where you're going to be grabbing quickly while holstering. It allows the hand to slide. And that we've got this indentation. You can see the depth there, right where the thumb could rest. Now, I shoot like this, so it doesn't affect me, but for one-handed shooting, that is spectacular. And on the other side, that's also allowing some room for the hand to get in there. Backslide frame fit, we got a little bit of shift, not much. Front, a little bit of shift, not much. Looking down below, we have a magazine well from the factory, which is awesome. And most importantly, you notice that it's short here and adds toe. Having shortness in the back means this is not going to add to your risk of printing like so many other mag wells would. And having that toe allows it to scoop and hold the hand. If you've got large hands like me, that helps keep you out of the way for inserting a mag. See, no pinch. Additionally, if you're running a dot, most dot errors in learning to run a dot are vertical alignment issues. and a lot of that is done with pinky pressure to correct. So that is a very utilitarian mag well and should help with actually feeding, and you can see that it is correctly sized to that magazine well. Backstrap's interchangeable. YouTube won't let me show you how to do that, but you drive out this pin. I imagine you're going to have to get the mag well off as well. It appears to be through the bottom of that. Our sight picture we already talked about. These are steel sights, and they have a nice ledge, even an angled ledge there to really grab on. So should you have to do one-handed manipulations, the tactical racking off of a rock or something from Army Brothers, those are definitely going to work for it. Right side, we've got all the same controls that we saw on the left side, completely ambi gun. Props for that. Next, we'll field strip the R7 Mako Carbon Compact and take a look inside the gun. These come apart a little bit differently than you might be used to. I believe it's also a Bubitz thing, and you've probably seen it on another gun from another company that I believe he also had design influence in. We've got takedown levers on both sides. We're going to need to pull those down. We will also be pulling the trigger, so we want to make sure that we're clear. And then bring the slide back a little bit. The takedown levers will come further forward. And with a touch of the trigger, you'll see the slide comes right off the top. It does not go all the way forward, and that's indicated by this end plate being flush. You saw how sealed up the gun is while it's together. That's one of the features on there. Looking inside, we see a slightly different construction. Still a striker-fired gun, but built a little different. Beefy ejector. That ejector is going to do its job for a long time. Pretty sure of it. Now we'll take our slide apart. It is a modified Browning action, so it comes apart still like your other Browning action guns. A little bit of pressure on the recoil assembly to pull it out. Interesting Palmer spacer there. So we've got a longer rod but a shorter spring. I wonder why they didn't go with a longer spring. Curious to hear what your thoughts are on it. It appears to be made of polymer. And then we've got to pull down, tap forward to bring the barrel back and out. You have to pull down because you can't tap because the top of the slide is closed. And then looking inside, you can see we've got our drop safety there. Very nicely machined, and you can also see the screw holes for the optics mounting system. As far as full specs and details and other things like that, check the pinned comment over on my website. That's where I post all of that stuff rather than drag it into these videos. Next, we'll check our barrel for chamber support. I'll be using some Liberty Ammunition Civil Defense. This is nickel plated, which helps with corrosion resistance for a round I handle all the time, but it's also a bit of a lubricant. When we check our chamber, we're going to be dropping around and listening for a plunk. It sounded okay, and you see we did not get in very deep. With the press of the finger, we can get in there. The round can still turn, so that might have been a little bit of dirt, although I don't see any. I'll run a brush through it real quick and we'll check again. Alright, with a 9mm bore snake run through it, we'll check. Still a bit shallow, but I can tap it in. So it might be a slightly tight chamber, although I can still rotate brass. I don't know what's going on there. Now for the record, if it was, there we go, now it's dropping all the way in. Yeah, so it must have just been maybe a little bit of oil sealing or something like that. But we can see we do not have absolute full chamber support, but we've got most of what we need, and the manual says it's ready for plus B. That little base of the round that is protruding there is the strongest part of the brass. So not too worried, but if you're a reloader, maybe want to be cautious. Kimber also warns against using reloaded ammunition in their manual. As I reassemble this by simply reversing the disassembly process, I'll tell you about what you'll see in the range video. You'll get our absolute first shots through the gun. No warm-up, no prep, no highlight reels on this channel, just real impressions. Sometimes those first impressions are accurate and stick with us throughout the review. Sometimes they are not. I'm curious to see how that goes. Now in reassembling this, you're going to be watching for these cutouts here, where it's just slightly thinner. You can see there's no rail there, and lining that up with the front rail. There we go, like that. Sandwich it down and bring it back, and it'll lock on. We'll also do full magazine +1, see how these mags run fully stuffed. Take it over to our trademark What's for Dinner test, see what the gun eats with 10 additional loads, including various different case materials and projectile types and weights. Then to our spinner for sights and trigger control. I love these sights, that should be easy. Practical accuracy, 5 shots from 7 yards, which is also where we conclude our thoughts before we go into the after shots section that gives you our thoughts after shooting from 2 different well-experienced and well-trained shooters. Very excited to have this in hand. Probably bring out the little guy as well to compare it, and maybe the BB6. Now the BB6, like I said, is not available anymore, but it is kind of the origin story. Really unique pistol that I think went cutting edge on design simply because they could. Some of the choices possibly controversial in some people's opinions. Kimber has tamed that down and produced a very nice looking pistol. One thing I failed to mention earlier is you might be asking why it's called carbon compact, and that's because this polymer has some carbon infusement in it to help strengthen it. Very similar to another alternative way of doing that I just mentioned in another video. The problem with polymer is it wants to normalize its moisture level with its environment. And so I'm sure you've all seen some polymer get brittle or get soft or lose its shape over time. That's from changing humidity in environments and changing temperature. And so if you want something to last longer than that, you need to find a way to prevent the polymer from doing that. The carbon reinforcement should add to that, as well as perhaps make for a more metal gun-like shooting feel. We'll have to see. T is the one that's super sensitive to vibrations in guns due to various things she's got going on in her hands, so she might be able to sense that and talk about it more, but this feels really good in the hand. Feels like it wants to be a shooter. We'll see you on the range, and thanks for watching.